Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Victoria and we are back for another recommendations video. For this video, we are going to be talking about, I don't even know if this is a trope, but it's one of my favorite things that you see in books, and that is like feuding families. Like feuding or rival families. Hope that makes sense. Kind of like Romeo and Juliet style, where against society's expectations or against the expectations or rules of that community, these people from feuding houses fall in love. It adds like a forbidden aspect to it that I find so fun and enticing, and it's one of my favorite things to see in books. So I have a couple that I'm going to recommend for this video that have this in it, and we're gonna get into it. So the first one that I have is A Reckless Match by Kate Bateman. I have mentioned this book before many times on my channel. It's one of my favorite historicals, and it is about Madeline Montgomery and Griff Davies. And the Davies and the Montgomerys have been feuding for generations. And this takes place in Wales, and the king has decreed quite a while ago that every year on a neutral patch of land between their two properties, one representative from the Montgomery family and one representative from the Davies family has to come together on the same day every year and shake hands. And this year, the Montgomerys are really hoping that the Davies don't come. The head of the Davies family has recently passed away, and his three sons are kind of scattered about, so they are really hoping that they don't come, because if they don't come, the decree from the king said that if one representative from a family doesn't show up, then they forfeit their land to the other family. And the Montgomerys have recently come into some money troubles, and so Madeline Montgomery shows up on the day that she's supposed to as the representative, hoping for nobody to show up so that her family can be saved from financial ruin, and that she won't have to marry this old man in order to save her family. But sadly, against her wishes, Griff Davies comes riding in, shows up, and the two of them end up in a romance together. They grew up together. One thing that I find so fun about this book is that even though they're feuding families, they've also been neighbors their entire life, so they know each other really well, and they played together as children, but their playing together was like playing pranks on each other. But they still played together, they still had fun together as children, but it was just like at the expense of the other. And so they sort of fall right back into that like prankster banter where they like to mess with each other. And they have a lot of fun together, but they end up trying to come to agreements about what to do with their neutral land now that Griff's in charge of his family, and they discover this secret tunnel of caves and uncover corruption together in their town. It's so interesting, it's so fun, and I absolutely loved it. One that I'm going to recommend is Heavy Crown by Sophie Lark. This is the last book in the Brutal Birthright series, and this one follows Sebastian Gallo, who is the youngest son of the Italian mob, and his romance with Elena, who is the daughter of the, I think she's Russian mafia leader. And the Russian mafia and the Italian mafia do not get along at all. They are not allies whatsoever. They are enemies. And so Sebastian and Yelena are not supposed to be together at all. Both their families do not want them to be together. or they think that the other one being with them is a trap. And so it has that same sort of like forbidden feuding vibe to it. And it's so good. It's a mafia romance book, obviously. It has a lot of like darker elements to it. It is book 6 in a series, so I think it would make more sense if you read them in order, but you probably would be able to understand it if you didn't read it in order. But it's really, really, really good, and it has that same vibe without actually being like a feuding. It's more of a like darker feud than this is. So then the next one that I'm going to recommend is Never Seduces Scott by Maya Banks. This is another historical, and it also follows feuding clans in historical times. So this one follows the Armstrong family and the Montgomery family, who are feuding clans in the Scottish Highlands. They do not get along at all. They have been fighting for years. And again, there is a decree from the king that Evelyn Armstrong, who is the daughter of the head of the Armstrong clan, has to get married to Graham Montgomery, who is the head of the Montgomery clan, in order to unite the clans. The king does not want the clans to fight and ruin his kingdom. You know what I mean? He's like, you need to align with each other so that you do not get out of hand. And so they are required to get married, Evelyn and Graham. Evelyn is deaf, and her family doesn't know that she's deaf. Her family thinks that she's crazy. They think that she's daft. She had a injury as a couple of years ago that she like never was the same from, and she spaces out and she doesn't answer or talk to anyone anymore. And so her family thinks that she's crazy. And they are terrified about her getting married to Graham because they worry that Graham's going to take advantage of her. They don't want Graham to, as Graham's a Montgomery, and they don't want him to hurt her because she's an Armstrong when she is unable to care for herself. Graham doesn't want to marry Evelyn, but as soon as it's decreed and as soon as he does get married to Evelyn, he feels responsible for her and treats her like a Montgomery. He's like, it doesn't matter that she's an Armstrong, she's my wife now and I'm going to care for her. And it's so sweet, and you really see the feud intensely in this one because Evelyn is an Armstrong, and so she comes back to Graham's keep now that they're married, and all of his Montgomery people that live there hate her. They treat her terribly because they don't like that she's an Armstrong and that she's living with them. So it is pretty heavy on the feud in it, but the romance in it is so, so good. Graham is such a sweetheart, and he's so doting to her, and he is so protective of her, and it's adorable. Then the next one that I'm going to mention is Blindsided by Victoria Denault. I think Denault is how you pronounce it. This book is a new adult college age romance, and it's part of Serena Bowen's Moo You series, or like Moo You world. So it's like her world of True North. So it takes place in the same town that Serena Bowen's True North series takes place in. And this one is, which is in Vermont. It's a small town in Vermont, and Moo You is the name of the school, or like the slang name for the school. It's actually like just, I think, the University of Vermont or something. But the hero in this book's name is Tate Adler, and he is a hockey player for Moo You. He's a very popular hockey player, and he works at home while he's at school, and he's learning how to take care of his like farm. But he originally grew up on a farm, and his next door neighbor also owns a farm, and that is the Todd family. And Maggie Todd also goes to Moo U with him, and the two families hate each other. This one is much more like Romeo and Juliet style, where they like end up like sneaking around behind their families to try and keep them from knowing that they're together. But the Adlers and the Todds hate each other. Grandchildren and the children don't really know why they hate each other. The grandparents kind of keep it a secret, and they just know, the children just grow up knowing that they hate the other family. They've been feuding now for like decades. So while they tried to ignore each other and everything growing up, they did live next door to each other, and now that they're in college, they're finding it a lot harder to ignore each other because they are running into each other a lot. They're involved in the same things because they both are into farming, and so they are in the same classes, and they are part of similar clubs, and they go to the same, what's that called? Like farmers markets to sell their products. So something happens, and the Todds are not able to go to the fall farmers market. They don't get a booth. They didn't sign up in time or something like that. And they really need to have a booth. They really need to go there and sell because it's a big market for them to sell things, and they really need the money. And so Maggie ends up catching Tate in a compromising position, doing something that he would not want anyone else to know about. And so she blackmails him into sharing his booth with her family, with her, so that they can sell their stuff there too. But they don't like each other, and the families don't like each other, so they spend a lot of time at this booth kind of stealing customers from each other, or fighting or arguing and that kind of thing. But after a while of doing this at this farmer's market, they realize how well they actually work together, and how much better off things are when they work together instead of when they're trying to like steal customers and stuff from each other, and how when they play off each other and they work together, it's better for both of them in the long run. And over time, they end up developing this really great relationship. I think one of the main things that I love about this book, and really all the others that are in this, is the banter. Because it's not enemies. It's never really enemies, because as it goes in, it realizes more that although they're in feuds, they spend a lot of time thinking about the other family. So like, similarly to like what I said with the reckless match, is that, okay, yes, their families are feuding, but they're still neighbors. And that's the same thing with Maggie and Tate, is that they're the same age, they're neighbors, they're both farmers. They realize that they have so much in common, and that they've sort of grown up together. And as they're bantering off each other, it's fun, and they have fun doing it, and they realize like how boring things would be if they didn't have that banter and have that like fighting energy, and how much more successful their lives have been and their businesses have been because of that like competitive style, you know? So I find it so fun. So the next one that I'm going to mention is actually, they're not actually like families, but I think it works for the same type of like vibe, and that is Frat Wars by Saxon James. This book is a new adult college romance between two members of feuding frat houses. So while they're not like feuding families, when you're in a fraternity or a sorority in college, those people become your family. They become the people that you spend all of your time with. And so in Frat Wars, one of the heroes, I gotta learn their names, hang on. Chad and Bailey are their names, and Chad is the member of one of the houses, and he sees this guy at a party one day, and he really wants to hook up with him, and they end up kissing, but before they're able to actually hook up, Bailey learns who he is. Bailey is new to the college, and he has just recently transferred from a previous college, and he joined this college's chapter of his fraternity that he was in at his old college. So he's new, and he's learned that their fraternity that he's now a part of is feuding with another fraternity. They don't get along, and that they're in like serious competition with them. And he's heard that the big main ringleader of the other fraternity's name is Chad. And so when he goes to this party and this guy and him end up sort of starting to hook up, he learns that his name is Chad. And he's like, shit, you're that Chad. I can't hook up with you. And so he leaves. But even after learning that they're from the feuding fraternities, they're having a harder time than they thought staying away from each other. And so they end up starting to sneak around, trying to keep their frats from knowing that they are hooking up. And they become kind of like enemies with benefits, or which leads into a romance. But it has the same sort of energy as like a feuding Romeo and Juliet style feuding family. But it was really fun. It is and I had a lot of fun reading it. The last book that I'm going to mention is another one where they're not like families, but they feel like it. And that is The Rivalry by Nikki Sloan. This one is about a Ohio State cheerleader who has a romance with a Michigan State, I think it's Michigan State, football player. Ohio State and Michigan State or the University of Michigan, I can't remember what it is. I don't follow football, but they have like a crazy rivalry. It's Michigan something. But Ohio State and Michigan have this crazy rivalry. They a very long-running rivalry. The main heroine in this book, whose name I can't remember, Kayla is the heroine's name. Kayla is an Ohio State cheerleader. She has lived and breathed Ohio State for her entire life. She was born in the freaking Ohio State Stadium. Her mother refused to leave when she went into labor because there was an Ohio State football game going on. Her mother used to be an Ohio State cheerleader. Her father played football for Ohio State. They are full-blooded Ohio State fans. And she is at a wedding where she meets this guy that she is super interested in. They have a really good time talking at this wedding, and he invites her to meet him later. And when she goes to meet him later, he chooses a bar in Michigan territory that has big Michigan flags everywhere, and she freaks the fuck out. And she's like, oh no, you're a Michigan fan. And then he's like, I go to Michigan, I play on the team. And she's like, oh no, I could never. And so it becomes this will they, won't they, because she really, really likes him, but she's trying to stay away from him because she feels like she's like committing treason against Ohio State because he is their tight end. He's their one of their star players on the Michigan football team. And it's hilarious. Like I said again, the banter is everything. And he is a not as big of a, he's not as big into the feud as she is, but he has a Michigan tattoo and all this stuff. Like, he definitely likes his school. And so he finds it kind of silly in the beginning, at least, why they can't be together. But it's so funny, like, even like later on when they're having sex in one scene, she has to like cover up his tattoo because she's like, I can't look at it. And when he shows up at her dorm room, she has like Ohio State like regalia and memorabilia everywhere, so it's very funny. And I've just had the same, again, similar vibes, that rivalry, that feuding element to it that I find so fun and so enticing to read. And I really, really loved it. And it's a little bit over the top, but I also think that it like worked really well for the story. That is the last one that I was going to mention, though. Like I said, I love this in books, and I am very excited anytime it shows up in a story. So please let me know down in the comments below if you have any recommendations for me that have this similar vibe in it. But that's it for this video, so thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe so you can see more from me, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!